And we have a great guest with us today. We have Becky Harris from Catoctin Creek. I'll give a little background and then we'll introduce her fully. Becky is the co-founder and the chief distiller at Catoctin Creek Distilling Company, the first legal distillery in Loudoun County, Virginia since Prohibition. She is making whiskey, just not making whiskey, but reshaping how we think about rye whiskey, which I think is awesome. Her background is a chemical engineer and is relentless pursuit of flavor. Becky has become respected voice in the world of American spirits. She's also the president of the American Craft Spirits Association, which we can talk a little bit about. But at Catoctin Creek, they have everything from is 100% organic rye, which again is unique, local sourced, and the whiskey is basically has an intention in every step and has won medals everywhere. So tonight we're going to be talking rye whiskey. For all those that don't know rye or don't think they like rye, we're going to change your opinion tonight. So Becky, how are you tonight?
I'm really good. Thank you, Brian.
And tonight we're going to do 3 tastings. We have your Roundstone 92, and this is the first rye that I had from y'all. And then we ran across you guys over the summer, and we got your cask strength.
Nice.
And then, of course, we were gifted this bottle last year at the golf tournament. It has been sitting on the shelf waiting for us to meet, and here we go. So we have a barrel select as well. So, Becky, give us a little bit of background about you and about Catoctin. And boys, go ahead and pour your Roundstone 92, and we'll get ready for that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I always sound better, I sound more intelligent. I sound, as soon as I start sipping, that helps 100%.
There you go.
So, yeah, so I always kick it off. I like to tell people that, the history of American whiskey is really what began with rye whiskey. And, the first white people rolled up to the shores in Jamestown and in Virginia, 400 years ago, one of the first things they did was figure out how you're going to make something to drink. And what they ended up using was mostly rye, and that was because if you look at the early colonial times, what they came for was they dreamed of finding gold, right? They find gold, not really, but they found tobacco. And they started to grow tobacco, and that was for many years the biggest business in Virginia was growing tobacco. When you look at growing tobacco, it strips the soil, and so of course you need to plant a cover crop every year, which is rye. And they didn't necessarily just plow it under because, waste not, want not. You harvest your grain, you sell what you can, you save some for seed, and then you turn it into something that'll keep, which is whiskey. So as the life in the colonies matured, and right before the time of, when you look at the time when George Washington's distillery was the biggest distillery in the colonial U.S., and at that time, there were 13,000 distilleries in the colonial United States. 3,500 of those were in Virginia. Now, Virginia was a little bit bigger. That time, what is now Kentucky was part of that.
Yep.
Bourbon wasn't invented in Kentucky because Kentucky didn't exist yet. It was Virginia. And the whiskey that was being made in those colonial times was mostly rye, especially east of the mountains. The spirits were also generally made by women, and that's another piece of the agricultural history, right? When you look at tobacco, it's a super labor-intensive crop. So whether they were free or enslaved, the men were in the fields tending to the tobacco, taking care of that, and making whiskey, making beer, making cider, making any kind of alcoholic beverage was part of the job of women. And that was a big part of the historical record, of course, because women didn't make the historical record. They didn't have identities, for the most part, in history at that time. So it was really interesting. There's a bunch of books that have been written about kind of the early history of alcoholic beverages. But I just think it's really interesting to point out to people that, whiskey history is so tied up with things like agriculture, like land use, like, gender politics, for God's sake. All of it is wrapped up. And when you came to the point, as we did, where we moved through, and at 13,000 distilleries in the U.S., within about 30 to 40 years of that, the number of distilleries had plummeted. And that was because of technological improvements that came over from Europe. The Olympics still came, and suddenly making whiskey was an industry. It was not something being done on every single farm anymore. Yeah. And so production went through the roof, and the number of distilleries crashed. And that was where we started to see the volume go up, the prices come down, and the consumption went through the roof. So that was really where we ran into all the things that ran us into prohibition. And I tell people that rye specifically, was the eastern seaboard, was all rye. It wasn't over the mountains where you were in the Ohio River Valley. That was where they were growing more corn. So that was really where bourbon made it more. Yeah. Now, if Prohibition shut everything down, why did rye die? And it's because rye whiskey distilleries, for the most part on the East Coast, were built in urban centers. That land was too valuable to sit there unused when all of them were shut down, right? Everything was redeveloped. Now, in Kentucky, nobody cared. They didn't redevelop it. They were able to keep it sitting there, mothballed, till the time it started. So that was why, and then there was all the smuggling, so rye became Canadian, right? Everything became Canadian. So it was our own history, our own American, kind of original American whiskey, really was lost. And it just didn't exist in the way that it had, which was made by hand, small batch production, local grains, and that's really where the flavor changes. And that's why I like to tell people that most craft distilleries are making rye that doesn't taste like the big brand's rye. That's a long piece of West.
That's awesome.
That's right. And I think with rye, you got to be careful, right? Because by definition, rye whiskey is 51% rye. So there's a lot of blends out there that their second grain might be corn, and it might be 49%. So again, you're getting technically a rye whiskey, but you're getting a lot of that influence on the back end of a very sweet and a large numbered second grain. But I'll give you a great story about rye before we dive into this one. I took rye over to Ireland. We did a golf event over there. Brought the sickly sweet bourbon. Here's Buffalo Trace. Here's a couple big, Bakers, something a little spicier. And then I introduced two different types of ryes. And they were actually, the Irish enjoyed the rye disproportionately more than they enjoyed the American bourbon. The American bourbon was too sweet for them. But the really cool thing was they were like, we don't have rye in Ireland. This is not even something that we even know. Like, these were whiskey drinkers, and they're like, we have never had rye whiskey. And they were all absolutely in love with rye because they really kind of put it towards a pot still. So when you run the pot still with, regular barley and then maybe the oats or, a third grain, you start to get some of that peppery, more of that herbal flavor than you get. So they were absolutely mesmerized by rye and was by far the disproportionate biggest winner that weekend. Like I said, I brought over some great bourbons. I brought over just a couple ryes just to say, hey, let's try this. And they were all like, the rye is the way to go. So for those that have not given rye a chance, you need to.
I mean, I came into whiskey when we started the business. I didn't actually like bourbon at all, and I came from single malt. I had tasted a lot of scotches, and so when I started tasting rye, it was like the closest neighbor. They're like neighbors, really. And so when we started to, work, it actually took me quite a while to find bourbons that appealed to my palate, right? Because of that sweetness, and find ones where the balance was right, the texture was right, everything kind of hit. I think it was probably I was drinking not expensive enough bourbons the first time I thought of bourbon I liked was actually one of Fred No's picks at Mount Vernon's 10th anniversary dinner, and I was like, "Oh, this is so good."
This one's actually pretty good.
I this one.
That's right. That's right. So we'll start with the Roundstone 92. Can you give us a little background about this one? And boys, enjoy. Cheers.
Yes, cheers, guys. So this one is, I like to, this one is actually not our flagship. It's like our, I thought this one would be good for y'all because I know y'all are, tend to drink a little higher proof. Our biggest seller in Virginia is our 80 proof. This is our 92. So this one is here for people who like just a little bit more intensity that also already like rye. People who don't like rye, I really recommend they try our 80 proof because it's just super easy drinking. It's almost like an Irish whiskey in that it's easy. You guys, I know you're not into the easiest drinking ones. You're ready to go right with the spice, more intensity. The barrels they pick for these are barrels where that rye spice is definitely there, but it's really nicely balanced with like some gorgeous citrus and plum notes on the mid palate. It's really great to sip. It also makes a heck of a Manhattan. This was the kind of product we created really because bartenders, industry people really wanted something with a little bit more oomph. People ask me my favorite. I'm the whiskey mom. I love them all, depending on the day. But this one is my staff's pick. This is the one they like to get, right? Their first choice when they're looking for a pour.
No, this is probably, as you can see, this bottle is almost empty, and the three before it have all found their way to a different place. But I think to me, this is a rye that again you can enjoy neat. I love the sweetness. And I love the little bit of herbal pepper throughout it. I mean, this to me is and again, I like a whiskey that bites a little bit. I like something that, it's got a little ethanol, a little punch. So to me, kind of, this really is kind of like the honey hole for me on a good rye. What do you gentlemen think?
I'm gonna let John go. I have to admit, I screwed up, Brian. I thought I had this form. I don't, so I've got my two samples of the other. So I got.
So you don't get to enjoy this one.
While I have the floor, I'm gonna say that I now know the Becky's well laid out history. That when I ask my wife to give me a pour of anything, I'm just honoring her history of going there. I'm gonna try that. I have 30 years of marriage. I'm gonna try that.
You can try that.
Give that a shot, Brian. Angela will love that. Go for it, Mel. I can't wait to hear the results of that conversation.
That's
so, Becky. I definitely would say I'm more of a novice at my tasting ability on this, but I agree with Brian with your assessment of things. This is a very got a great price.
You're gonna have to cut him. You're gonna have to cut him. He's killing me.
Wow, that just started out.
we are getting some feedback here.
We're gonna count to 3 in your mouth.
Let me do this. Hold on. All right, that work, John?
That's better.
Right, how do
Better
I
on
sound
mine.
now?
It sounds better.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be brief then. I agree with.
That's
Brian.
really the whole goal, John, was just to make you.
Yeah, we didn't even want you to. Just mute. No.
This is I would drink this neat, any day of the week. I mean, this is very a really good bite to it, but also very smooth going down. I mean, I kind of tend a little bit more towards the spicy side of things, like you had mentioned, and this one fits the bill really well. I can see why this is a staff favorite of yours.
I have a question for you, Becky. So, in creating flavor, you have the grain, you have the cooking, you have the fermentation, you have yeast, you have distilling times, you have fermentation times. So there's thousands of ways to create flavor. What's one or two tricks that you like to do that might be a little outside of the norm or maybe some of the bigger industrial groups?
That's proprietary, Brian. She can't say that without
Oh,
killing.
she doesn't say exactly. You don't have to give me the grain of yeast, but you know.
What I will say is one of the things that I think is most important for rye, if you want to get really good rye with gorgeous texture and kind of so when you're distilling rye, most of the rye that's out there is made in your Kentucky style bourbon still, right? You run it through. You can run 300 gallons in about 3 minutes. Flashes off. It's incredibly fast. Probably the smart way to make money making whiskey. Rye whiskey doesn't work like that. So the rye is the best part of the flavor. A lot of the flavor oils that come out and that coat your tongue and insulate you from some of that heat and that ethanol and even that spice. A lot of those oils come off the very end of a production run. So we have like a 6-hour production run. And as we approach, we start off pretty high proof. You kind of go on, you get to that middle part where you're going for quite a while. But then when you get toward the end, we really slow down our cook and start to hold back the ethanol in there. Keep refluxing, because as you approach the end and right before you get the tails, if you can extend that and collect those oils at that lower proof, what that gives you is a velvety mouthfeel that you just don't find typically in most of your big bourbon stills. If you guys are familiar with Leopold Brothers, they have done some work with the 3-chamber still, which was the original sort of high volume still for rye. And in the high volume, it makes maybe 1 or 2 barrels a day. That's considered high volume because rye needs that kind of time. It needs more of that. So using, as we do the hybrid column stills that we control and it's a batch process, I can really extend that cook time, pull off those really gorgeous flavors, and that enables that sweetness, that velvetiness to kind of come in on the mouthfeel. I think that bar none is really what makes a difference. When I was looking maybe at Cripps, it was probably 10 years ago, we were talking to Larry Ebersold of formerly of Seagram's MGP, and we were having a conversation. He said, you really need to get a bourbon still and run here. It just makes more sense. You can do this in 3 minutes. And we had a conversation about it, and what we felt like was that by doing something different, there is value to that. It brings something different to the whiskey conversation than what you get when you're just trying to do the same process the big guys do.
Yeah.
Because we'll never compete with them. We can't ever compete with them on price.
That's right.
And so why don't we compete by bringing something extra with a value, something they're not willing to do, and they just won't. So that's kind of where we decided to kind of plant our little flag, is that we feel like really choosing the best process for this particular historic grain is kind of a game changer for us.
Nice.
Becky, do you find that, and I'll tell you a story, it was funny. So when we started this journey with Brian and he started educating us a bit more and we started delving into different flavors, my first notion just off the bat was, I don't like rye. I don't really even know if I had a reason. But then I started tasting and I would guess that things were rye and found out they weren't, and the ones I liked were rye. So is it a complexity of flavors that rye brings in that people just think they don't like it because the bourbons are just so naturally sweet and they're natural? It's only just easier to drink in terms of the flavor profile, but you know what I mean? It's a known flavor almost when you start talking about bourbon. Do you find that as a challenge sometimes that you've chosen rye with some palates? You got to get them past that hurdle?
Well, that's, one of the things when I'm doing like whiskey shows, for instance, and I'm like, you want to try some rye whiskey? And everybody, I don't like rye. I don't drink bourbon. And I'm like, well, here's a rye that I want to introduce you to. And it's 100% rye. And that's where we have our 80 proof flagship. Kind of gets people's feet wet if they are frightened, and they're like, oh, this isn't what I was expecting. And I think, for so long, the whole whiskey industry, rye of the whiskey industry was represented by Kentucky rye, by Indiana rye, and by Canadian rye. Three major types. And that is, I mean, when you're thinking about the whiskey industry in general, 94% of what's on the shelf is produced by less than 5% of the distilleries in this country, right? So you may try a number of ryes that all have the same DNA and backbone. And that was why when we started in 2010, and I was starting to taste people, and people are like, it doesn't taste like rye. And I'm like, it's 100% rye. It absolutely does taste like rye.
That's right.
But what I would tell people is, I believe that when you come to a point where you have enough distilleries going grain to glass from different parts of the country using different processes, you're going to find the same kind of cool variation in flavor with rye that you find in Scotland with Scotch, in Kentucky with bourbon, right? People are doing different things. It opens up people's minds of what's possible. And that for me is what's really exciting. And so for years, I would, go and taste. I had conversations with, with Bill at Jack Rose in DC. And he would say, for years, he would just be able to open up a bottle and immediately you could tell if it was MGP rye from Indiana. Didn't even have to taste it. You could immediately smell it, right? Immediately. And he was like, I just want to start trying things that are different. And that was really where I was. Now you're starting to see that. I can try California ryes. They're fantastic. I can try the Empire rye from New York, up in New York State. Some of it is so spicy, just like, whoa, totally different than what we're doing here. South Carolina rye is different. Much more exciting. I think that's really, when you're talking about the whiskey industry as a whole, kind of holistically, I truly believe that the growth of craft producers has really not only given you a whole bunch of different products that those craft producers themselves are doing, but we have also stuck a cattle prod into the large producers and made them start doing interesting things too. So when you look at Overholt's Monongahela rye, I will guarantee you that they would never have done that if there were not 3,000 small producers out there in doing different things all the time and making it so they have to innovate to stay relevant.
Right.
That's right. A lot like the craft beers did to the beer industry. Just completely, here's
right.
Miller Lite, Bud Light, Bud. That's it. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute. We're losing our market share. Let's go buy them all.
And that's what the big spirits producers have been very smart in that they started innovating pretty quickly on, right? In the early, by 2013, 2014, they were starting to buy small producers. They were starting to do more releases, do different things, open that stuff up. There were also a lot of other kind of less savory things going on in, the wholesale tier and on the retail tier. But, they've not rested on their laurels. They don't want 1,000 piranhas cutting into their market share in the same way.
That's right.
But I do believe that if you saw the craft industry plummet, you would stop seeing quite the amount of innovation from the big guys because they wouldn't see a point to it.
Yeah.
Hey, Becky, real quick, I'm Brian. I know we want to taste more, but I have a quick question. Do you see, so along Brian's beer model, as they've adapted to the craft brewing mantra, right? They had to get creative, and you're saying that the big boys are getting creative. Are you seeing, and obviously there's a fair amount of consolidation already, or there's a lot, I don't know about consolidation, there's a lot of brands that come out of the same distilleries on the larger market. Are you seeing consolidation starting to enter into this market too, where the big boys are going, hey, Catoctin's got a really good rye. We want to buy. I mean, I'm just curious, is that a either a fear or a goal that becomes something that
we had a strategic partner for a while. We were Constellation was one of our investors for a while. It's a difficult path most of these large companies don't actually know how to sell craft brands.
Gotcha.
And so I think there's some challenges when a strategic picks up even you could talk about whether Heaven Hill, they've acquired a stable of craft brands. A lot of them have seen the sales go down very precipitously since they've been into the larger sales organization.
Right.
I think that sales for craft requires a specific set of skills, and that's something that can be done, but do the strategics really care about doing that? That's going to be the question, I think.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brian. I derailed.
No. Please ask questions. John, you got anything?
No, I just want to get on to the next one.
All right.
John, my God.
Man, a few words and many drinks. Fair enough. We're going to move on to the cask strength. And Bo and I scored this at we went to Richmond, and we went to one of the whiskey things festivals there, and we were able to ascertain this bottle there. So this is probably one of my favorites. I love it neat, but it makes a great Manhattan if you like a little bit more.
Yeah.
If you like a little more fuel.
I have to show you my Glencairn since I'm at the farm and I'm not in my normal environment. This is my little West Virginia shot glasses.
Nice.
In the farm, sitting there for years, and so this is what I'm tasting, which is kind of cool, I think.
It's very highbrow, you go. Very highbrow.
Did you
Thank you,
wash
thank
it
you.
out first? I mean, it is West Virginia.
It hasn't been washed in 72 years.
That's what
That's
adds to the
a lot.
flavor, John. I'm going to pick flavors you don't even know are in there because of this glass hadn't been washed.
So this is really where I think the distillation shows up. When I'm picking barrels for these, I'm really looking for the ones with the velvet on the tongue. Sometimes it's like when you taste it, it's got so much texture that it reads a little less proof than the 92 sometimes, because that you don't get quite as much of the kind of spice and kick because of that weight, that texture. This one is always a favorite. For me, the nose has to be amazing. When I'm popping open when I dump a barrel and I pop open that drum and I smell it, it's got to make me want to hang on, and just be like, oh yeah. And then really have that balance of, the baking spice, the intensity, but you get the flavor at the same time that you get the intensity. I mean, I think we've all had cask proof whiskeys where it's burn up front and then, now it's starting to taste really good. But the burn, you got to wait through the burn. No, this one, it's got it at the same time. I don't want to wait through the burn.
Yeah.
I like your description of velvety. That's exactly what I get on the front. I get like a buttery velvet tone. I get there's a little bit of heat for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Not overpowering at all. And then it just fills my entire mouth and palate gets filled with the flavor, a little bit of the heat. It's nice and warm. It kind of stays with you. I like this a lot. And I remember liking it before. I love this. This is good.
Honestly, when he said cask proof, I mean, I was just pulling off of a cask proof bottle of Maker's Mark. I mean, that hits you right off the bat. So I was expecting that to hit me right at first, but I mean, man, that's really smooth, like right from the get go. But then it stays with you for a while. I mean, I'm surprised. And I'm not all that easily surprised.
Yes, you are, dude. You are so easily surprised.
Again, to me, doesn't drink high proof. I think the 92 has a little bit more ethanol component to it than this. To me, on the front, the nose is spectacular. You're pulling sweetness, spices. I'm getting herbal mint. Right out the gate, I get sweet and mint together, right into pepper. But it's just smooth, and honestly, I almost get zero ethanol at all. So this is the one I refer to as dangerous cask.
Yeah.
This is you have 2 of these puppies, and you're like, woohoo!
What is the proof on this one? I don't have the bottle in front of me.
They're usually run around 58%.
Yeah, this one's at 58.
Yeah.
So 116.
It does not drink that way at all. It does
No,
not
I,
at all.
I wouldn't say so either. I
You're
can
right.
see how this would make a really good Manhattan as well. That's
The dangerous one.
Yes.
But Becky, the nose on this is absolutely.
Yeah, it's gotta, if it's gonna be picked, if a barrel is gonna be picked for this, it has to have a nose that's just like invites you in, right? It's got to kind of like pull you right in, hook you, and then you go in, and then that intensity and that kind of two-fisted approach of the intensity of flavor and the ethanol is, because it is about intensity. That's why you drink cask brewed spirits, is because you want something with extra, intensity to it.
I feel like there's a little bit of cinnamon. I don't get the mint at all. I get some cinnamon in the nose, though. I know you said baking spices, Becky. I mean, I get a little bit of cinnamon, which I like that. I like that. It's not a hot cinnamon. It's just kind of a little bit of a sweetness with the cinnamon to it. But I don't get the mint, man. I'm trying to find that mint now that you said it, Brian. I can't find it. Do you find it, Becky? You get mint out of
You
this?
can. It's just like a little hint of, not really. I think of it as more like maybe a little bit of maybe spearmint, just a titch.
Okay.
Specifically, not really like a pepperminty or even.
Oh, no, I'm thinking spearmint, like double mint gum. That little.
Yeah.
It's like that subtle mint, not peppermint. No. So
No.
yeah, definitely spearmint. And again, some of those herbal notes, but the sweetness, the honey sweet is just, it's through the roof on this one. I mean, it's almost, I would almost go as sweet as almost a bourbon. Like it's giving you that. And again, when you think of rye, most people will go, oh, ryes aren't sweet. They're peppery. They're like a well-made rye is going to give you some wonderful sweet tones throughout. And I've had some really bad ryes that don't. But to me, that sweetness, that honey sweet, and then with a little bit of herbal and then some of that baking spice, I mean, it's a really well-made whiskey.
And this
Really
is
well-made.
where your varietal of your rye comes in. Some of the northern cold region rye, some of those tend to be a spicier varietal. We tend to mostly use Ryman, which is an old breed. It's a very tall rye, probably almost 6 feet tall, maybe even a little taller. It's not a hybrid one. We like it. It works really well. It tends to have more of these kind of plummy, citrus, fruity notes. And the spice is there, but there are varietals that have like a lot more spice. You start to go into some of the, like I'm trying to remember which one. I think there's a Horton one up in New York, and that one is spicy as all get out. And it's just, that's a characteristic of the grain. So, I think there are places, because we are a relatively warm climate, our farmers down in the northern neck, so he's close to the shore, so it's humid as all get out, right? So different things grow there than what grow well up in Alberta and what grow up in Minnesota. So that makes a difference. So that's part of, I think, why we choose what we do.
Well,
I don't want people. Good.
Good.
I was just gonna say I don't want people to think it's not got that rye flavor, that rye spiciness to it though too, because it's not overpowering at all, but I get it and I like it. I like where I get it. I get it deeper in the taste than I do up front, but I get it and I like it. I like it a lot. Can't get away from it. It's not all minty, man. It's still
No.
And I didn't say it was all mint. I said at the very front, you get the sweet with a little bit of spearmint, and then it rolls into the baking spice.
I'm just giving you a hard
Don't put words on my tongue.
it's a slow burn too. I mean, it stays with you for a while. That's what I'm getting out of this whole thing.
I like that. Good call, John. I agree. Very warm. Coach the
That's right. I just texted him to say that. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Technology, man.
I figured, but I was going to give him some kudos and let him act like he knew what he was talking about.
I couldn't let him have the win. I couldn't do
My
it.
own original thought, but Brian had to bring me back down to earth.
I couldn't let him have a win. There's no way. Here, I have a question for one of our members. He wasn't able to jump on tonight. He said, I've given him a bunch of different ryes, and he has yet to find a rye that he's really appreciated. So he's like, I want to understand rye better, but what would be a cocktail or different ways to enjoy a rye and to be able to work on having it neat? So how would you go to people and say, here's some good ways to get into rye other than just sitting down and maybe trying it? Becky, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, for me it was I tend to try it neat first. If I find that the intensity, maybe like a particular rye, sometimes I tend to have my palate tends to like a fairly balanced approach to the whiskey. So when things get like if I'm sipping scotch, I tend to not be a youthful, peaty scotch person. To me, it's like just too much.
Amen.
I appreciate what they're doing. I understand why they're doing it, but it's not my jam. So what I personally do is when I'm trying ryes, and I do try them regularly from other people making it, is if there's something that doesn't appeal to me, a lot of times taking the time to try to figure out why helps me understand and then learn to kind of, with repeated exposure of different things, kind of try to parse what is it that is like not my thing in here. Like, for instance, Old Grandad. I know people love Old Grandad. I cannot stand Old Grandad. And I just keep trying it regularly to try to figure out, okay, what is it about Old Grandad that just doesn't hit my pleasure centers? So I tell people, just keep trying, small visits. You don't have to commit to everything. I try to go low proof with rye. If you go a little lower proof, if you're not necessarily, or if you have a cask proof and it seems a bit much, start adding a little bit water, take it down. Give yourself, that'll take some of the intensity off. Old fashions, one thing about old fashions is that they do, adding that little bit more sugar can take some of that heat, take the spice down. We've found a lot of people love our hot honey rye. That is one of our newer, and it's just because the honey in there kind of leavens everything. Our maple cask rye comes out in October usually, and that one people love because it's aged in maple syrup barrels. So if you want to take and do a maple old fashioned with some of the rye, just add a touch of maple. Sometimes that'll take the edge off and get you to where you can kind of. So I would say just maybe just add a touch of sweetness. See where it's kind of experiment, right? Because each person is so different in what your experience is. For me, whiskey is about, when you're tasting whiskey, it's about thinking about what your sensations are, and then it's almost about what does it remind you of. Sometimes things remind you of, oh gosh, that reminds me of, time spent with my grandfather, or being in the woods. This one has this gorgeous kind of scenery note to it, and I'm thinking of like pine forests and being in a certain place. So I mean, it's kind of getting in touch with, if you will, your inner poet. What are you thinking about? Because you can talk about tasting notes from an analytical perspective, but they're not usually terribly interesting. You want to kind of free associate. Let yourself go. Don't worry about whether or not, nobody can call you wrong. Nobody has your mouth. So you're always right, whatever you say.
That's right.
I just think though, Brian,
don't give you any crap.
I mean, Becky and Brian, and I hate to, I don't want to be controversial with the guy who asked the question at all, but I would think that if you get into a cocktail to try to get yourself into a certain grain of whiskey, you run the risk of creating a flavor profile that then negates what the whiskey was built to deliver, right? So, I mean, it's kind of a tough way to get out. You may not love it, But if you can like it and you go, oh, but if I put this in, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like a backwards way to go a little bit. Just me.
Yeah, I kind of lean
We're gonna get
toward
comments out the yin yang.
proof.
Sorry.
Only you.
We're in West Virginia right now. Backward way to go
No, no.
is the West Virginia way.
Go ahead, Becky. I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
That's why I play with proof first. I'd
Yeah.
take it down and start just kind of like add water, find where
that's-
you're like, okay, I can kind of find this. This is like, I can tolerate this now, and then start kind of like raising it up and see.
I guess that's my point. I would recommend that. And we had one of our other buddies on another tasting. It was private tasting. It wasn't one of these, but he did that exactly. He was sitting there struggling to enjoy something that we were all noting, and he dropped some water in it, put an ice cube in it, and then he let it sit and he drank it. He's like, oh, this is much better, and I'm actually enjoying. But it's still, you got the water in there. Obviously, you open the flavors up, but you're not diluting it with other flavors that come from a cocktail. I guess I would just think that would be the first recommendation to try and get that flavor back out. But
I like your point about the cube too, because, you know, sometimes your temperature, bringing that temperature down a little bit,
Yeah.
chilling it.
take some of that heat away. That's some of that harshness. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Brian.
No, you're good.
That guy's gonna blast me. He blast me. Bo Hammond just blast me. It's okay.
No, I'm literally texting your address right now.
Absolutely.
He will be coming to your door.
Maybe he
And you-
needs
We
to
love all
drink it out
feedback.
of,
All publicity is good publicity, baby.
he needs to drink it out of that West Virginia shot glass.
That's right. That's right.
Here's the other one. There's two. There's a different version for the next one.
Oh, man.
That's right. Keeping your glasses clean. I love it, Bo. You're so highbrow.
I just want to know what my grandparents had that they were doing so many shots out of, because these were all just in their cabinets. So I'm like, that's pretty cool.
I love it.
My grandparents were getting all loaded on shots.
No, it was called their tonic back then.
That's what it was.
See?
Tonic. Yes.
See, I'm Southern enough. When I used to go to my grandmother's house, and she would have a bottle of whiskey in a cabinet, and she would never pour it. So my father or whoever would be, she'd be like, "Oh, I need my tonic for tonight."
Oh yeah.
So my father or somebody would go and make her a special drink, but it'd be my wife has the same story about hers, and she put it in the last magazine about brown medicine that there was a shelf, and now typically it was rock gut whiskey, but again, the Southern, it was a tonic. It was, it was made for, and on occasions you need two tonics that night. There, your sniffles were a little too much or whatever, but the tonic.
Maybe that's where your penchant for whiskey came from, Brian. Did they put it on their finger and rub it on your mouth just to make you shut up?
My grandfather knocked
Just a
me
little
out.
bit right here like this. And
Oh yeah, no. And then my grandfather knocked me out. I think I was about 5 at Disney. It was his job to take me back and take care of me until the rest of the family came home because I was the littlest. And he basically gave me a shot of whiskey, and I was out cold in the corner.
Stuck on this boy.
No, he forced me to drink whiskey. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. I don't remember it, but it was probably a good night. No,
Probably a good night.
it was probably a good night. We'll go ahead and go with the actual. This is actually a barrel select, and you can give us a little insight on this, Becky. And I did cheat. I gave John and Bo samples of this, and it was sitting for the last. I saw Bo Saturday.
Yeah.
So it's been sitting on my little bar for. So yesterday morning at 9 a.m. I was getting ready to do some work, and I was like, I need to try that. So I've actually a little sample of this.
You eat it.
9 a.m.
At 9 a.m. I'm over here in the corner going, oh, that's pretty good.
You're
Kinda
like a
powerful,
mixer.
man.
I do most of my tasting in the morning. It's really better because you haven't put as much into your body at that point. So
I agree.
I have a better palate in the morning.
I do all my tastings in the morning when I film because it's a much better way to. I find it much more flavorful in the morning.
Yeah,
But it doesn't mean you have a drinking problem.
yeah. You're just a pro.
Thank you. That's one way to. I'm going to
I love
see if my wife believes that one. No.
I love the nose on this. I just love it.
Yeah, so this is a Sauterne cask finish. So this is a year in New Oak. Then we put them into Sauterne's cask. Sauternes is a really sweet white wine, a dessert wine. So that's going to add a lot of those kind of like sweet notes, which will kind of leaven out again some of the spice. I think that's kind of one of the nice things about, you can, when you're doing finishing projects, right, you can kind of try to decide what you want to bring to the party, if you will. And so in this particular one, we were looking at, let's bring some, kind of a sweet Sauternes notes to it. Very raisiny, right? That kind of deep textured raisin note that comes from a Sauterne. That would pair nicely with kind of the spice. And so this is a distillery only release. So this one is, we have it in the distillery and people can fill their own bottles. So we just brought that one because we thought it was a lot of fun. We do a couple, when we have once we kind of use up one of the barrels that we've had for this, then we tend to do some things online. What ones would you like to see? And then people vote on their favorite, and then we put that one out as a barrel select for the distillery release. So it's a lot of fun. It's a cask proof. I think that one was 118.2. If I remember right, I was just doing the end of the month.
Yeah, you nailed it.
See, I made fun of Brian. He took his glasses off, so it takes him a while to figure out what the proof is.
I just know it's just called distance. It's like, how long is my arm? Thank you.
My arm isn't long enough anymore.
And thank goodness I have really long arms, so it is to my benefit. I have very short legs and very long arms. I get it. So for my vision, it's perfect. I think, to me, like I said, I had this yesterday morning. Raisin that is exactly what I pulled yesterday morning. I was like, it has got that raisin note, sweet, syrupy sweet raisin, and then it comes in with a little bit of, that baking spice on the backside. I think the finish this is probably the quickest of the finishes, but it's clean and crisp, and I mean,
I get
good.
The spice a little more up front. I agree 100% with the raisin, the dried fruit, the syrup notion. I agree with all those. I get a bit more spice up front on this one than I did the other one, but then I agree the finish, it does tend to, it doesn't linger like the other one. There's not a warmth that holds on with this one.
Yep.
Like
Yeah, usually when I'm doing finished projects, I'm doing them with something that I feel like could use some like tweaking.
Sure.
So I might find that, this one, has more spice in it. So what could I pair it with in a finishing project that would bring, those other notes to it? Since we do a lot of single barrel projects, people are always like, well, what if something isn't right? And I'm like, well, that's then a good candidate to bring to, something else. Usually there are lots of, things that might not be optimal in a single barrel that you can go ahead and do something else with, and it becomes something much lovelier. So that's kind of where we went with this one. It is fun, a fun one. So it's
What did you do with your chemical engineering degree before you did this, Becky?
So when I got out of school, I worked for a place called Amica Foam Products. They make styrofoam, like the clamshells, the cups. Then I worked for a company that did copper and nickel plating on plastics. So they are shielding your iPads, your laptops, phones. That place is nasty. Lots of really nasty chemicals there. Like sulfuric acid, chromic acid, a lot of electrochemistry. So it was kind of a messy place. I worked there for a little bit. I had a job working at Cibovision. I made contact lenses. Contact lenses are hard to make. That's actually a pretty tough thing to make. So that was interesting because that's a different kind of polymer chemistry. So when, Scott kind of came up with the idea, my husband, of doing this as a project, I was like, hey, I learned how to make contact lenses. I can certainly learn to make whiskey. Can we make any money? That my friends, is the trick. It is harder to make money
The whiskey.
than making good whiskey.
we have
Making good
learned-
whiskey you can do. Making
we have
money
learned-
on it is the tough part.
We have learned from others that and I'm sure you would attest to it, that the regulatory and everything else is a real challenge to making money. But the reason I asked that, your knowledge really shines through. And I find myself after 30 years working in the lumber business, literally trading sticks. I would make fun, and these guys would make fun of me in college too. Really, you're studying to trade sticks. And now I'm in the chemical protection of wood industry, right? So we're treating wood. And so there's some chemistry I've had to start to pick up. Nowhere near your intellect, but I can just tell your knowledge. That's really cool, and I think it shows through in what you guys are crafting. It's pretty neat. So thanks for humoring me on that. I appreciate it.
Oh no, it's been a diverse set of experiences, and in some ways, I kind of wish I had almost let off out of school into this and had even more time to really kind of do, because I meet so many great people out there who've been doing this for a long time, and I just love to hear the kinds of things that they know that they have kind of been working. I have a really great friend who has been he does specializes in brandy. He learned from the élevage and cognac. And when you start talking to him about the way they age and the different things they do, and it's just fascinating. I mean, there's so many different ways of making spirits and the different techniques that come from different cultures. Just really, really cool. It kind of, you can definitely, spend your whole life learning different kinds of distilling and really kind of digging deep into it. I have friends who make that. I have friends who just do the weirdest brandies you ever met up in Portland.
Well, of course, it's Portland. If you say weird, you have to say Portland.
It is Portland. The man makes banana brandy.
So what's the? Do you have an old barrel sitting out there that you guys have played with? You're letting age to a point where you're like just waiting for that moment to tap it, or not?
Our oldest barrel has actually been, we released it this year. It was a club pick for our club that we have, and it was 7 years old. Nice. And a 53. So originally, for a long time, we started out in 30-gallon barrels. That's about a half size, right? It was a really good size to start with when we started, because when we started, I was the only person there day in, day out. And moving a 53 by myself safely by hand was not something I wanted to do. Sure. So a 30 I can move. I can do almost anything I need to pretty safely with that. And we were also moving a lot of our barrels. We didn't have a box truck until about 2017. So I was moving my barrels in the back of a 1993 Ford Ranger.
Nice.
Those will only hold 4 30-gallon barrels.
Before
5 30-gallon barrels, no.
The rear release springs would just go snap.
And that was with the stronger springs. So, they did not want that. So we didn't have a way to transport big barrels until 2017. So that was really when we started to look at, okay, and as we move now, kind of as we mature more, one of the things I'm doing some things on is it time to start moving a larger part of our products to 53s? The COGS itself, the cost of the goods, I can bring my costs down a lot. Maybe that's time to start tweaking that, but that's going to change the aging profile. So, all of that has to be kind of taken in consideration.
And one of the things that amazes me about this business, as I'm learning just a little bit about it, is you put these things out there, and in 7, 8, 10 years, you're depending on what you're trying to do, you then taste it and you open it. So you've done everything you can to make it what you think you want it to be. And obviously there's nuances with the barrels and all that stuff, right? But you're obviously expecting it to be a great product. So when you opened it, did it meet your expectations? Did it not? Was it better? I mean, what were your expectations when you have a 7-year product that in the 7th year, you finally like, okay, let's open this thing. Let's see what it is.
Well, some of them, of course, are better than others. When you're tasting any given one of my friends talks about, the aging process. It can be almost cyclical. So you could happen to come to a barrel and it might be on the low point of the flavor. If you wait 6 more months, you might come up to where it's like suddenly, boom, there's a lot more flavor there. It's not a linear process. These things don't like suddenly, tick, 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 boom, there it is. There's also the point where it starts to go too far. That's one of the things that people are talking about as, we've got this ocean of bourbon in Kentucky right now. Well, we all know that, after a while, you need to move it out. It does not necessarily, everything being aged 21 years is not going to be delicious. It's going to be oak bombs, and that's not necessarily winning. So the way I see it is that I try to find, the way to kind of use barrels, keep them moving. One thing about that I thought was really interesting was talking to Lisa Laird Dunn. She's, the owner of Laird's. We were talking about how her family's company has stayed independent and strong for, one of the oldest distilleries in the United States. And she said that the thing her grandfather passed down year after year was inventory kills.
Yeah, it does.
That's business in general. That's not even just the whiskey business.
That's not even
everybody's like,
whiskey.
If you build a warehouse, you're just going to fill it. You got to sell that stuff. Absolutely.
So she said it is far, far better to run out of something and have to allocate it than it is to have too much. And that's where, right now, a lot of distilleries are struggling, and why a lot of them have had to shut down production is because they're at the point where they have too much.
Sure.
Yeah, I see a lot of the bigger brand companies are coming out with new labels. We have a 10-year-old and a 15. Oh, now we have a 12-year label. Now we have this label coming because there is a gluttony of bourbon right now.
It's going to be 15, but we're going to pull it out now. And
now
it's 11.5.
That's right. We got to get these off our shelves.
Yes. Maybe you'll actually see some of these prices come down. I'm not holding my breath, but you might.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly something that annoys me a lot. I mean, one of the things we try to do is price our product, and pricing is kind of it's an art as opposed to a science. But, you also, one of the things I feel like is we shot for with our product lineup is that we want the whiskey to be something that you can treat yourself to at almost, we can't do the $20 bottles. We can't do it. The wholesale price is $20. If I'm trying to do it, I can't even get close to that.
Yeah.
Because Virginia takes 57% of each bottle, right? So people are like, hey, why don't you have a $20 bottle? And I'm like, I do. It's Virginia that's caused the rest of it.
I think it's really, really funny, Becky, as we've talked to a couple different distilleries, local, craft distillers like you, that 57, when you said that 57, I got a smile because I'm like, man, I've heard that number so many times.
The
state of Virginia has just ingrained it in your all's minds to going 57% costing.
57%, exactly. So what I try to do is have different ones and try to keep the pricing to where it's like, frankly, as a small business person, I can't go out there and buy $250 bottles of whiskey. There's just not going to happen. It does not my budget. I love to be kind of, if I'm in the $50 to $60 frame, I feel like I can, I'll buy it. I'll pull the trigger. I'll take a chance on something. When I start getting up above $90, $100, it's like more often than not, sometimes I have to walk away. Just that's my budget. So I try to make it so most of our products are something that you can afford. It's fairly priced for something that is made from scratch and local. And I think that there has been a lot of people out there pumping up pricing faster than maybe the liquid can support.
Sure.
That's very fair.
That's very fair.
That was
'cause, I mean,
that was a very PC way of saying that there's a lot of crap out there that people are overpricing today. I mean,
well, I mean, you think about it though. Like, if you take a chance on $100 bottle and you don't like it, or if it doesn't fit your palate, or you just don't like what's coming out of it, then that's $100 mistake. I mean, like, but a $60 mistake is a little easier to stomach if that's the case. I mean, you just,
Well, we call $100 mistake a DAC.
and there it is.
Like
baby.
Cowboy quarterback,
I
the
thought we
Cowboy
were
fan.
gonna
Just
get to this
to
whole
fill you in.
call.
John is our resident
Say-
Dallas Cowboys fan, and we do not like him for it.
And for all the
I had to say that.
I can't
Right
wait
when you
for-
said it, I was like, John, you're welcome
the
to
Super
this one,
Bowl.
brother.
The Cowboys are going to win the Super Bowl one of these days, and I'm going to host a show when that happens. And
It just won't be in our John. It just won't be in our lifetime.
Oh, my God.
I'll tell my kids about it.
We were so close, Becky. We were so close to just getting through this entire hour.
All right, gentlemen. What was your favorite of the three tonight? What was your favorite, or for both too?
Mine was the what we did. It was the cast strength first, right? Not the
Yep.
reserve. Yeah, the cast strength. That was my favorite. The cast strength was my favorite. And I apologize, I didn't have the other one with me. But the cast strength was my favorite. Not by a big margin by any stretch, Becky. They both had really great flavor profiles. I enjoyed them both. I think what I like most about that cast strength, I actually like a whiskey that finishes long. I like to experience it beyond that first taste, and that one did that for me, 100%.
Sure did.
How about you, John?
Same for me. Almost the exact same thing. I mean, like the cast strength was. I liked that. What you said you texted me, but I actually came up with myself. The slow burn, like the continual, like it stuck with me for a while. I really like that. So yeah, the cast strength was my favorite, and that was my original idea. I'm sticking with
Becky, we've known each other for 30 years. This is a mess. This is what we've been doing for 30 years. My favorite, I really enjoyed the Roundstone, the 92. That is just a daily pour for me. I love that. The cast strength is spectacular. I like a good Irish whiskey, so I actually really enjoyed this one, the Barrel Select, because I get some of that raisin notes that I tend to get with malts. I know it's with the finishing product, but I'm getting some of that. So I think that piece was in the sweetness kind of ties into Irish a little bit. So I would have to go. That was it was good. Like I said, I really enjoyed it at 9 p.m. and I really enjoyed it at 9 p.m. So really good whiskey.
Here's the key, Becky. Catoctin has a place on our shelves across the board. So
It
phenomenal.
does.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does, and we're making lots of trips right now. So we're gonna come up and see you sometime this summer. We're basically every month we're getting on the road. So we will come up to Percyville here and come hang out with you for
Love
2 hours.
it.
And but Becky, how can they find you? Find your product? Any of that great information for the people that take the time to watch this?
Yes, absolutely. You can check us out at catoctincreek.com or at buyvirginiarye.com. Both of those will bring you to our store. You can find us on socials, all at Catoctin Creek. Kind of learn some more about what's going on. We're up in Percival. You can come and visit us. We're about 30 minutes west of Dulles Airport. And you can come out and visit us. We've got beautiful countryside up where we are, and we've just got our little tasting room out there, little distillery, and you can come by and try some product and meet some nice people.
Awesome.
Do you have anything new coming along? Anything like, ooh, we have something coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, so probably because of all the bottle kerfluffles with the tariffs and Chinese glass, which I, could say some choice words about, but because of that, I've had to delay bottling my hickory cask. So generally right around Father's Day, it'll probably be a little later this year, we have a cask-proof hickory syrup barrel finish. that we
Wow.
do. So there's a hickory syrup producer. They pull shagbark hickory bark, toast it, infuse it into syrup, and then they barrel age it in our barrels. And so we swap it. It brings this really kind of fun, smoky, almost bacony kind of flavor to the tap brew. And it is so yummy. It's not as popular as the maple syrup because a lot of people don't know what hickory syrup is or what, but it is so good. So that is coming out. I love it bring it in the summer because it makes me think of barbecue and, kind of hits all those pleasure centers for summer food.
All right, we're gonna.
Go ahead, Brian. Tell her your theory on bacon.
Well, it's an herb. Bacon is an herb. It's a flavor enhancer.
I mean,
Technically, when you think of an herb, what is it? It enhances flavors.
it's like bitters.
Thank you. It's one and the same. So
Bacon,
I think
bitters,
you're definitely gonna have to make a visit to come try that. I'm telling you right now, you had me at bacon.
Yeah. I just
You
love
don't get a
this.
physique like this and not enjoy a good piece of bacon.
Yeah.
All right, Becky, we appreciate your time. Boys, stay on for a minute. I need to ask you a couple questions, but
For sure.
Becky, thank you so much. Go out and find Catoctin Creek. If you're in Virginia, real easy to find. If not, get online, get it shipped. It's a really, really fine whiskey, great craftsmanship, and really good people. So make sure you go out there and support your craft distillers and enjoy yourself 100% rye whiskey in Catoctin. Thank you.
Pleasure, Becky. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Becky.
Bye.
Let me hit stop here.